The writer, Ira Mater, referred to Hieronymus Bosch's famous painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights, which depicts paradise, the great pleasures of life, and gruesome punishments. It paints sycophantic couriers jostling for favor and attention among naked humans without masks of civility and certainly not clothing, without soul, the same as animals. Utter ugliness, created out of utter silence and blissfully ignoring the despair of the wretched of our place on earth. A frightening outcome of professional neglect in the media. Our Calypsonians have sought to fill that empty ugliness by, every year, playing a role as social commentators. I recall the words of two of our great Calypsonians, the mighty Gabby and John King, who spoke directly to the need for that art form to go beyond empty phrases of wine you bam bam, bam bam, as expressed in John King's classic, I Am a Calypso, and in Gabby's Write the Song, which appealed to Calypsonians to go beyond the rhythm to the message in the music. In particular, John King is poignant. DJs can only play rock and jazz. I love you, yes I do. In a world that's hard as hell, make our leaders feel all is well. He then criticizes the images we project to Buckingham and Uncle Sam, that all we're good for is jam, pam-palam, and a big bam-bam. Instead, he urges Calypsonians to sing about Gaddafi's atrocities and the danger of Reaganomics, and that US is not for us. Adding, show them, Calypsonians, the purpose of Calypso. The threat I see on the horizon of Barbados is not dissimilar. That some journalists, like some Calypsonians, do not comprehend our power, our mission, and our purpose. Journalists are afraid to show our people, and indeed the world, there's more to us than our rhythm, and that we cannot just be judged by carnival and our cricket, for whatever that is worth. What I therefore see, what is worth in the post-Carlisle best era. What I therefore see is a mere form of journalism, no substance. In this case, I speak only of Barbados because from what I know of media in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago in particular, healthy and fertile fields exist. At this juncture, I will venture to justify my conclusions about Barbados by looking at the different branches of our media and selectively assessing how they help or hinder in the growth of our democracy. That's why I'm here. I will therefore look at television, radio, the internet, and the press. As an experienced practitioner, I know our role and how we execute and how we should execute. We can play up or play down the news as well as its insignificance. We can foster and feed emotions, create complacency and blind spots, misuse great words, and uphold empty slogans. We can deify or demonize public figures. This is frightening power. Placed in the hands of fools and people who confuse social conviction with social mobility, or those with improper agendas, it can have disastrous and long-lasting consequences. I want to examine our media in the context of this authority and to question if how we conduct our affairs is fair to our people, our country, and our democracy. First of all, television. We have a sole television station, a matter which unfortunately satisfies both political parties because they are able to abuse its monopoly in order to access a vast majority of captive decision makers and in so doing gratify selfish partisan ends. Even as I now criticize local TV, I must declare my interest. I serve on boards of local and regional media houses that have expressed interest in obtaining licenses to operate television services in Barbados. None of my criticisms, though, are meant to further the cause of any application for licenses which it may be construed that I am a part of, to the extent that such interests may yet exist. Perhaps Vic Finance can tell me whether it exists or not. And so I asked a series of questions about television, the answers of which are self-evident. What percentage of local television is really local or regional, and thus relevant to the decisions in our lives? What percentage of television broadcasting is devoted to public affairs? What constitutes public affairs in TV programming? What constitutes television news? We know all the answers and are ashamed of them nearly 50 years after political independence. The diet of ministerial speeches and reports, the avoidance of covering matters of national importance which may offend government, the suppression of critical comments are nauseous and repulsive to the eye and ear and should be to our profession. This type of coverage lulls an uncritical and unthinking audience into a sense of having a country that is so well ordered that there are no problems, no concerns, no complexities. People are soothed into slumber, deluded into acquiescence as trusted, soft-spoken talking heads paint only rosy pictures and promise only milk and honey, supported by rabid and putrid views unsheathed by commentators chosen exclusively for their jellyfish-like characteristics they barrenly display. I hope I haven't offended somebody. This costly, high-stakes deception is ruinous to democratic ideals. It is a betrayal of exclusive access to the homes and minds of our people. It secures flattering control of the consciousness, thought, volition, emotion, and judgment of the unwitting, especially as fact is forfeited for fiction and legitimized by the absence of contrary views as enforced silence of the other side. Our television programming throttles the right of full access to information and thus saps our democracy into dry nothingness. Radio. Few members of the public recognize the extent to which radio is severely restricted in what it can broadcast because of very rigid legislation enforced by detailed rules. Radio has a limited role to play in public affairs in the way that newspapers that are largely unregulated do. According to the terms and conditions under which radio licensees operate, according to the Broadcasting Act, Cap 274B, the allocation of time to the broadcasting of matters of religion, politics, or industrial controversy, and the ensuring of the preservation of impartiality are subject to ministerial control. In other words, the minister in charge of broadcasting can step in and cancel licenses on the basis of content on radio. Beside our dominant jukebox stations, there are the exceptions which dedicate about 2 hours per week to serious examination of public affairs. Almost by agreement, they choose the earlier hours of sedate Sundays to worship at the feet of Froude. Radio stations with call-in programs provide valuable fora for the input of the governed of our society. These are, however, dominated by those who are idle enough, keen enough, and patient enough to monopolize programs, using repetitious rhetoric as if they delight in the sound of their own sweet sameness. And I suspect they do. It is a sick form of self-arousal. That is as badly as I can put it. One would wish for a more varied, more vibrant set of opinions in this daily diet of the dedicated. Indeed, the fact that call-in programs are dominated by a few regulars whose positions on every issue can be safely predicted by a clear and sustained political bias speaks to the fact that some means has to be found to make these programs more accessible to a wider number of unbiased, independent, and eager Winstons and Winnies in our community. Call-in programs add value to the democratic process, however, and must not be mislabeled or misappreciated. The internet. Mass social media through the internet, which knows no boundaries, is a recent phenomenon of immense potential. Its access to multiple people on multiple platforms offers opportunities for instant access in a way hitherto unimaginable and unknown, overcoming challenges of currencies and indeed freedom of trade. The internet has transformed the communications and information world. For the most part, we are better off for it. It is an incomparable global network that transcends national frontiers, cultural borders, and time differences to open vistas that collect and disseminate views as varied as the entire world population, and often just as colorful and just as misunderstood and misjudged. Unfortunately, it is that same vast collection of data that confounds more than it is comprehended. Does the internet help our democratic process? I think it does. What does media do well, as we are meant to, are offer thorough thought and discussion to advance the progress of civilization, transmitting information, facilitating the exchange of views, constantly holding up a mirror before the people. Do they hinder? I think they do. Insistence on instantaneous transmittal of news or information has compromised some of the valuable tenets of brand journalism and has, in the process, injured our cause and tampered with the text of our mission. Information is not news, and those who use social media to transmit information are not bound by the strict and essential rule of fact-checking or an absence of recklessness in respect of issues and people's reputations, which are all integral to good traditional journalism. The prudent exercise of taste and compassion in sensitive affairs has been thrown through the window, sacrificed on the altar of the scoop and the sensational. It has also offended by airing wide-ranging opinions not properly identified as such and often made indistinct with news information, a confusing and dangerous threat to the examination of issues and ultimately democracy, since the purity of fact and the sanctity of figures are happily ignored. In addition, in Barbados, we have grown our own version of popular social or unsociable blogs. They have not distinguished themselves for accuracy, transparency, or fairness to the extent that traditionalists like me would prefer. And I abhor the anonymous nature of most of their offerings, as well as the temptation of many to resort to personal attacks and scurrilous abuse. With this demand for urgency and speed, gone is the concept of accurately reporting events. The requirement of careful checking, making sure competing sides are offered the chance of full ventilation, particularly in controversy, is often not accommodated. But the so-called blogs have revolutionized the old media culture of limited exchange of views and should be seen as complementary to established media, as they certainly do not supplant it.